I'm going to ask Rick to come to the podium and let him introduce himself, and let's give him a...
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right, well, welcome San Antonio. How's everybody doing this morning? Pretty good? How many of y'all went out last night and tested out the local drinking establishments? Anybody go out there and sample a little bit? I'm sure some of y'all did. Well, I'm excited to be here. I'm actually from Nashville, Tennessee. I've got a little place in Austin, so I kind of go back and forth between the two, and it worked out that I could be here with y'all today. Like I said, I do live in Nashville. I'm always curious how many folks have gone to Nashville, Tennessee for a trip. Yeah, very cool. A lot of country music down there, which I'm a big fan of. Although I've got a daughter who's 12, and she's trying to make me listen to Taylor Swift now. And I don't know much about that girl, but I'm glad she's got a steady relationship. That's all I can tell you. She's been going out with this one fella for about a year now. Plays for Kansas City, and that wasn't always the case. She had gone through several fellas. You know, she had 16 different songs about breaking up with boyfriends at one point. So, you know, after 16, the problem could be you. It's just saying. Shake it off, you know. Why you got to be so mean? But I enjoy traveling around the country. I'm a comedian half the time, and the other half the time I get to speak and have fun while I do it. And so today's program is going to be talking about a few different things, but mainly the overall theme is how we can kind of reduce the stress that comes with our jobs. No matter what you do, there are things that we allow into our life that kind of add stress to it. And we'll talk about how we can get rid of those things, focus really on what we can do, and move forward with that. You know, you can be distracted a lot with things you can't handle or have really no ability to control, and that can really drain you, and you've got to find a way to kind of get rid of that altogether. So the fun thing about today's program is you might be a fan of the Andy Griffith Show. Now, you may not be, and you won't be lost if you're not, but how many folks grew up watching the Andy Griffith Show a little bit? All right. How many still watch it once in a while? All right. So I grew up watching that. I grew up in Kentucky with my dad and mom. They're tobacco farmers, and we really didn't watch a lot of TV. It was basically Little House on the Prairie, the Waltons, and the Andy Griffith Show when I was growing up. So pretty simple stuff. But when I watched it with my dad, it was the only time I really heard him laugh out loud. I mean, the dynamic these two guys had between them and Barney Fife, it was just a great character. But a lot of times he got himself in trouble, and it took everything in the world to get him out of trouble, and that's what was so funny about it. But what we have today is called the Mayberry Method. And again, we're just going to talk about three primary things. One is eliminating distractions. So can I hear you say, nip it in the bud? All right, very good. We're going to talk about focusing on the plan. Can I hear you say, don't be a goober? And we're going to talk about serving beyond expectations. Can I hear you say, keep your bullet in your pocket? All right, so if you're chuckling, you know about the Andy Griffith Show for sure. So when I think about distractions, man, we have so many in our life. On the Andy Griffith Show, there was one guy that always came into town, Ernest T. Bass. How many folks remember this character on the show? All right. So when he came to town, what did he do? Specifically, he would throw rocks. Yeah, he would throw rocks, blow up windows. He would just, anything that was glass, he would shatter it with these bag of rocks that he brought down from the mountains. And no matter what Andy and Barney, the deputy and the sheriff, had to do that day, they had to stop, switch their focus over to Ernest T., figure out how to clean up his mess, and then get back on track. And when I was thinking about this program, I think we all have things that are like an Ernest T. Bass that pop up throughout our day, right? We've got stuff that comes out of nowhere that we got to deal with. Sometimes, again, we allow it to happen. Sometimes it just comes crashing through and we can't stop it. But it really adds up when we don't take our time and focus on the thing in front of us and we get distracted. In fact, in the United States alone, how many dollars do you think we miss out on in workplace productivity just by not being fully focused at work? Billions. It is billions. Yeah, how many billions? It's higher than 5 billion? Higher than 10 billion? Higher than 20 billion? Higher than 30? Higher than 500? Yeah, so that'll get your attention. $650 billion in lost productivity in the workplace. That's not new business or creating any kind of new ventures. That's just work we're not finishing that's right in front of us. That's bigger than the GDP of some countries, and we're just not doing that. So it really does add up. When you have that, you got low satisfaction with your work because you're not focused, and you got high levels of frustration because you're not getting to the job that you like to do, that you signed up to do in the first place. And it really does stack up. There's all kinds of distractions that we encounter. Just before I get into what the statistics and surveys say, what are some distractions that pop up throughout your everyday life at work?
Side projects.
Side projects? What was that? Meetings, yes. We're being distracted right now. So focus while you're being distracted, people. Let's lock it down. What other things? Phones ringing off the hook, sure. Emails, phone, yeah. Those are kind of the standard ones that always come through. The surveys also came back with a few different ones that I hadn't really thought about. One survey said long lunch breaks were distraction at work, but hey, who's even getting a lunch break at work anymore? Anybody? We're eating at our desk, dropping crumbs into our keyboards, you know. If you do go out for a fish sandwich, don't bring it back and heat it up in the microwave oven in the break room. That's going to affect everybody else that afternoon and be distracted by it. Nobody in here said flirting at work, so good for y'all. Flirting at work can be a major distraction, so I recommend you hire average-looking people. That's the simplest way to do it. If you don't look twice, you don't look once, really. Now y'all looking around like, am I average looking? So yeah, flirting can definitely be a lot of issues with that these days, obviously. Our own cell phone definitely rings a little bit and chimes, and sometimes it's hard to shut that down. Our workplace environment, sometimes we've been interrupted so much we can't get back to what we were doing because we can't find it on our desk. And sometimes it's just frustrations with our technology, right? Got new programs merging and all these things combining and trying to get everybody in one system, and you have to figure out how your old system works with the new. And that's always going to keep happening. No matter what system you build, there's going to be another one to replace it. So it's just one of those things you have to kind of deal with. Everybody's texting today. Y'all may or may not be aware that farmers are out there texting, and I don't know if you've seen what happens when that goes on, but it's not a pretty picture. That's going to affect your yield right there, I'm pretty sure. I saw this the other day. How many folks have ever been out to Albuquerque, New Mexico? Anybody? They have a hot air balloon festival out there. It's one of the best in the world, apparently, because of the big sky. And a guy was going to take his girl out there and propose to her on a hot air balloon ride. He thought, this can't be any more romantic. We'll have pictures of balloons in the background and fire coming up and all this stuff. Well, when he was getting ready to propose, the guy running the hot air balloon had been busy texting and wasn't paying attention. And before you know it, yeah, she said no. So yeah, you got to make sure the people around you are focused. Saw this guy delivering the newspapers to the delivery guys, actually ran the truck right into this guy's house. But if you can read the red letters from where you're sitting, he was just doing his job. How many folks got a tattoo out there? Anybody got a tattoo? All right, come up front. We're going to show everybody your tattoo and where it's at. There's an icebreaker for tonight, huh? Let's do that before dinner. Next time you get a tattoo, just make sure the person giving you the tattoo is paying attention and can spell, or you might end up... Yeah. I do like the double-decker school bus, though. That's a nice touch. And then it all kinds of leads to this. If we're distracted, we're starting to do two things at once, or we think we are. Recently, there was a big study done out at the University of Utah. Their psychology department really wanted to get into the brains of people who could multitask and figure out what are they doing that the rest of us aren't doing. Because if they could isolate that and teach the rest of us, we could all pick up that slack, bring that $650 billion down a little bit. So they brought them in. In fact, they asked different Fortune 500 company CEOs to send them their best multitaskers, and they would study them. So they did this over the weekend. They got the results back, and when they got it all figured out, what percentage of those people who were singled out by their boss as being great at doing these things, two things at once, could actually do two things at once? What percentage? 0. It's just barely higher than 0. You would think 0, but 2.5% of people who were singled out by their employees. Not only had they fooled their boss, they were kind of fooling themselves, most of them, right? But 2.5% could do it. And if you're 0.5% of a person, you're probably doing extra all day long. I don't even know how that works out if you're just half a person. But 2.5%. In fact, they studied them really deep, and other studies started coming out after that one. And a Stanford University study that multitaskers are actually easier to distract and lose focus faster than the average person. They're weaker at shifting from one task to another, and they're unable to even effectively organize information in the first place. So are they doing two things at once? No, they're doing a lot of things halfway and not getting anything done. In fact, they went back and asked all these Fortune 500 company CEOs in a different study, how many things do you try to accomplish each day at work and finish? What number do you think they came back with? Just 3. 3 things. But if they finish 3 things every day, it's 15 a week, 60 a month, and they can get a lot of things accomplished. But if you're trying to do 20 things at once, really nothing's getting done. You just kind of keep on pushing it down to tomorrow. If that isn't kind of scary enough, UCLA did a study, and they studied the brain, and they put all these different electrodes on there, and they actually found that it starts to shrink your memory receptors in your brain when you're doing two things at once. So you're telling your brain to rewire itself so that it can't absorb deep information. So it's a big time problem that we have, and it's a bad habit to get into. In fact, another study found out that if you're smart as a Harvard graduate with an MBA, as soon as you do two things at once, you're about as smart as an 8-year-old kid. So there's a lot of evidence that says that we should just focus on one thing and finish it, and I think we need to remember that. So to remember it, I want you to remember this. Multitasking is like a mullet. How many folks remember mullets? There's the mullet family. Y'all remember? How many of y'all had a mullet? I had a mullet. Of course, they didn't call it a mullet back in the 80s. It was just long hair, you know, but now it's the achy, breaky, bad mistakey, or the West Virginia waterfall, or soccer rocker, Canadian passport. There's a lot of names for it. Maybe you know one that I don't. Let me know later. But it is like a mullet. We think it's cooler than it really is. Other people encourage it because they're laughing at us, and very few people can pull it off. In fact, I did my own research and found out that about 2.5% of people with mullets actually had a good mullet, and it was just Ric Flair and John Bon Jovi. That's about it. So the reality is, two things at once equals zero. We got to remember that. The tricky thing is, we're distracted a lot. In fact, every interruption costs the average person about 5 more minutes to figure out where you were before you got distracted. And I got to be honest, I'm 56. The older I get, the longer it takes me to remember I was even doing something in the first place. You ever have one of those days where you started something and had completely no idea that you even didn't finish it? Like, it can be dangerous in the kitchen, but like the other day I was changing a tire. 3 days later, I walked back in the garage and I'm like, oh yeah, I need to finish changing that tire on the John Deere. Like, I just completely wandered away and forgot all about it. So 5 minutes is generous. I think 3 days is mine. The tricky thing is, the average person at work is interrupted at least every 12 minutes. So do the math on that. Every 12 minutes, 5 times an hour, 5+ minutes to get back on track. Half your hour basically is gone every single day, every single hour. So we do have to set some boundaries and defend our day. It's not easy. Social media is making it super hard because they've designed it to be addictive. It's like they've gamified it to where we're going to look in there and see what's going on. YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook still kind of control most of the bandwidth in the evening. If you're not on the streaming services, those are the main ones people are searching. They estimate that 63 billion out of that 650 billion is attributed just to social media. So 63 billion is still a big number. It's not quite 10% of the big number, but it's a huge number we've got to think about. The average time employees are on sites throughout the workday is 1 hour and 10 minutes. So sometimes we're losing our focus at work and scanning around, and that adds up. The good news is if you're over 50, you waste the least amount of time on social media, usually less than half an hour a day. So how many people are over 50 out there? Anybody over 50? All right. And from those people over 50, what are some reasons that we're not on social media as much? Or using apps? What's that? The internet is hard. That's the right answer, according to most studies. The internet is hard. The facts are, if you're 30 and up, the internet is changing faster, and technology in general is changing faster than it ever has in your entire life. If you're 20 and under, it's changing at about the same pace it always has, because you've grown up with that. So there is a generational difference. We need to take that into account when we're working with other people that are a big gap in age between us and them. But it is true. And I thought when I saw that study that they thought, the internet was hard was the best way to put it, but they also said sometimes we just have frustrations trying to figure out how to use it at all. A new app pops up and like, are we going to put this on our phone and have it drain our battery? And I thought it was kind of mean because I was in that 50 and up group, but then something happened in my own life that kind of drove it right on home. So I told you my dad was a tobacco farmer up in Kentucky, still farming tobacco. He started when he was 5 with a half an acre. He's 87 years old and still farming. So he's just been at it his whole life. Now the past few summers, probably no matter where you live, the summers are getting hotter and hotter. Whatever the cause is, it's just the case. He's out there in the field, direct sunlight. There's no shade trees in a tobacco field, obviously. So we were worried about him. We said, can you just maybe let us get you a little cell phone so we can call you, check in on you once in a while just to see if you're okay. Just for us, not for you, but for us. My dad looked right back at me and my mom. He's like, well, if you're going to get me the phone, slap the internet on there for me. Just slap the internet on it. I said, I don't know if I've seen that plan from Verizon, but I'll call ahead and ask. You got to slap the internet plan? I said, well, what do you want that for? He says, well, I want to check the weather. That's what y'all are worried about. Maybe a storm is coming and I need to know. And some baseball scores. That's all I want to know about. So we got him a little flip phone, prepaid minutes, as easy as we can make it for him, and set him up. A couple weeks goes by, I open my email box and I've got an email asking me if I want to follow my dad on Twitter. Yeah. Woo, this ain't good for nobody. But is it hard to do? Probably. From that phone, my dad got on Twitter in that little browser, the LED browser, and he set up a Twitter page. So I clicked the link and I go to it, and not only had he set it up from that phone, in less than 2 weeks he put out 164 tweets. All capital letters, no punctuation, and 0 followers. But I'm thinking, how in the world did he get on there and do all this? So I start scrolling down through it, trying to figure out, hopefully he just fell asleep on the space bar at some point and just scrolled it on out. But no, it's 164, and it's not making any sense until I get about 20 deep into it. And then I realize it's not 100, it's one tweet broken into 164 pieces that I'm reading from the end back down to the beginning. It started 2 days earlier. And it got even worse. The whole story was about birds, because my dad thought Twitter was a bird watching, updating website. Yeah. That's my gene pool pretty much. So I'm trying to get him followers. He's had the phone for quite a while now. He's up to 6,982 tweets. Only got 2 followers. It's me and the Audubon Society. I can give you a little sample of some of his tweets here. Blue Jays are nothing but a hassle in your face bird. Go back to Toronto, #American League. So he loves his baseball. Next time you talk to me about a bird box, it better be the KFC $5 fill-up. Worst movie ever. #original recipe. Let's see if we got any more. Oh yeah. Bald eagles mate for life. This explains why they are bald. No need to be good looking for a new ladybird. And then, speaking of eagles, I never really cared for Don Henley's solo work. Boys of Summer, super lame. So there he is. You can look him up. He's at Nuthatcher 401-873-966, which is also his social security number. So we'll get out of there. So yeah, maybe you're older and don't know how to use it, but you can get on there and try. Who knows? Now I saw this actually last time I was in San Antonio. I was just a couple of streets over at the Drury Inn doing a presentation over there, and I took the stairs down. I was about 6 flights up. I'm like, I'm not going to wait on the elevator. Well, I see this sign in the stairwell. Have you ever seen one of these signs? Yeah. I had never seen one, so I snapped a picture and went to the front desk and said, hey, is this a problem or something around here? She goes, you would not believe it. We've had 3 fires, and twice they found out about it online before we got a call at the front desk. I'm like, can you move me down to the first floor? That's a lot of fires for one hotel. But people are literally tweeting out, does anybody else smell smoke over here? Something's going on. Is it the popcorn maker? No, it's your floor. Get out, buddy. So we're just kind of obsessed with social media, and I don't see it getting any easier unless we start setting some boundaries up. Now, of course, again, these are the big 3. My hope is one day, and maybe there is and I don't know about it because I'm in my 50s, maybe there's just one website that collects all the information from all your feeds for you, and you can just log right into it and see it. And if they don't have one, they can just call it youtwitface.com and get on with business. And we can just log in once and be done. But it does take a lot of time, and they start young. You know, when my daughter turned 8 years old, she's 12 now, but when she was 8, she could not wait to get a tablet. Everybody else had tablets, you know, it was during COVID. So what had happened is they started doing online learning, and then all of a sudden she saw her classmates playing with their tablets while they should have been in the Zoom call, and then she thought she needed a tablet because they're all talking to each other instead of being on the Zoom. I said, you don't need to get an iPad. She goes, how about an iPhone? I'm like, that's a lot more. I said, who are you even calling? You're 8. Is it the Justin Bieber support line? You don't need a phone. I said, do what I did when I was little. Just go outside and play with a stick, right? How many of y'all play with a stick growing up? Anybody else? Yeah, get a wireless stick and see how that works out for you, you know? 64 hickory nuts or something like that. So she went outside, got her stick. 5 minutes later, poked herself in the face. We had to get her an eye patch. That's a true story. So there's a lot of ways that we're distracted, but the keys to really focusing back on what's important and eliminating those distractions are to have a specific time for the self-inflicted distractions, for checking our social media. I spoke to an IT group a while back, and a guy came up and gave me a great piece of advice that I actually have implemented. It took me about a month to do it. But he said, listen, if you really want to get your time back throughout the day, log on to social media after dinner, or maybe right before you go to bed. I said, I don't know if I can wait that long. He's like, it's going to take some time, but here's what happens. All day long, all of your friends in your network are scanning the internet, Facebook, Instagram, whatever platforms, and they're liking or sharing whatever they see that they like. And when you log on late in the evening, the algorithm picks all that information up and it shows you the most important 10 or 12 things that your friends found all day long. So your friends are doing all the busy work for you throughout the entire day, and it puts it right there at the top of your feed, because obviously when you log into any of the apps, they want you to stay on. So they're going to show you the stuff that your people thought was the most interesting. Then after about 12 or 15, it just fades away. He goes, if you can get in the practice of pushing it back, you'll get some time back. So the first week was a little bit tricky. You know, I usually sit in my bed and look at my social media until my cell phone dies, and I got to go get up and plug it in, you know. But I pushed it back till after lunch, then after 3 o'clock, after I had my coffee, and then after dinner, and sure enough, at the end of the night, it's all there. And after about 10 or 15, there's nothing. So if you can resist the temptation to do some scanning and looking, you're going to get back up to an hour and 10 minutes at work each day if you fall into that category, or 30 minutes more if you're in the older group. But either way, a specific time is going to pay dividends down the road. We don't want to multitask. We know that for sure. If you find yourself doing 2 things at once, best thing I've learned is just have a yellow notepad right next to me and write down the thing that distracted me, and I'll get to it later. But finish the thing you started first. Make the main thing every day. And defend your day. You have to have, like, how many people are morning people? We got morning people out there? And then how many people afternoon? You start to wake up? And how many people just love the evening? All right. So if you can defend your day when you're the most focused, you know, if you're an afternoon person, that's when you lock your door, shut off the phone, hunker down, and get your work done. Because if you can do that during your focus time, you'll reap a lot of benefits. If you're unfocused throughout your entire day, as we'll see here in a minute, it's not going to pay off. All right, quick trivia question to see who our real Andy Griffith Show fans are out here in the crowd before we keep on moving. Does anybody know the names of Barney Fife's 2 girlfriends that he had on the show? Thelma Lou, that's right, and who else? Not Betty, no. Thelma Lou and and Andy. She worked at the diner. I'll give you that clue. Anybody? All right, I realize this goes way back in time. It was Juanita. Does that name ring a bell to Andy Griffith Show fans? So Juanita worked down at the diner. You never saw her on the show. He would just call her up and flirt with her on the phone. And those were the 2 right there. All right, we'll have another chance here in a minute. Now that we've eliminated some distractions throughout the day, we can get our focus back and focus on what's most important throughout the day. When I think about the Andy Griffith Show, one of my favorite episodes that exemplified this was when Andy asked Goober to help him out just answering the phones at the courthouse while he was going to be away on business for a couple of days. So he went to the garage where he worked and asked him if he would take care of that phones with him. He says, hey, I'll be there on Monday morning, 6 a.m., no problem, I'll see you there. Well, Andy gets to the courthouse 6 a.m., he's not there. 8 a.m., he's not there. 10, he's not there, so he has to go get him. He says, hey, man, you promised me you'd be here to help out, but where are you? He goes, man, I'll be there in a little bit. I got to finish this job before I come over there. And he said, well, I can't leave the courthouse until you get there. So basically, Goober took the car apart he was working on and put it back together inside the courthouse and worked on it in there. So we already know doing 2 things at once won't pay off. Every time the phone rang, he didn't hear it because he was revving the engine or tuning something up, so he just completely blacked out on it. The only time the phone rang was Andy calling to make sure he was there. So Andy had to cut his business short, come down a day early to figure out what was going on, and of course he was just trying to do 2 things at once. But he at least had focus. He told the guy he was going to finish his car, and he finished it, and when he did, Floyd bought it, the guy sitting right there, the barber in town. So planning is an important thing, and you got to plan ahead. 50% of Americans admit to making rash decisions and buying grocery store items that weren't on their list. How many folks have ever bought something at the grocery that you didn't plan on buying? We all do. In fact, if my wife makes me go inside the grocery store, I'm going to fill up that cart with stuff till she makes me sit in the truck. You know, there's all kinds of weird stuff in there nowadays. But 100% of rash decisions are completely avoidable if you just take a second and think through, what is my plan for today? If it doesn't align with your plan, shake it off a little bit. Every minute you invest in making a plan will save you at least 10 minutes in the execution of that plan. So if you spend 50 hours putting a plan together for the year, it's going to save you major time getting the plan done. Otherwise, you're just trying to figure out on the fly, and all kinds of problems pop up you didn't plan ahead for. So every minute saves you a lot of time. This applied to me. I was trying to figure out a perfect example. The most practical example I had is I've lived in 3 different houses. Each house, they didn't have a deck, and I wanted to build a deck. So the first house, I built a deck. And I probably went to Lowe's and Home Depot and the hardware store 40 times to get the stuff I needed. I went back and forth, and I needed another board, and this didn't add up. The second house, I'm like, I'm not going to do it this time. So I at least made a list in my head. I kind of walked it off and made a list. Still probably went 15, 20 times. The third house, I said, I'm getting too over this. I'm making 2 trips the most. I went out, had 3 tape measures. I had my son write down everything. I measured it all out ahead of time. I even allotted for a little bit of extra in case I miscut a board, and went 3 times. But I made a bigger plan, the better plan that third time. It didn't take me that much longer, but it saved me a lot of gas, a lot of trips. Home Depot's 20 minutes away from me. Lowe's is 30. So I'm talking hours and hours of time it saved me. But I learned from my own lesson how to apply that. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And I'm going to give you a few examples of some people that did just that. Here's a guy fixing some wiring in his garage. He's barefoot on a stool, on an old piece of drywall, on a screen window, on a sawhorse. He probably said, hold my beer, right before he got up on there. I'm not even sure how he got up on there. That guy's pretty agile for his age right there, isn't he? I'll let y'all figure this one out right here. Can y'all see what's going on? I believe the toilet paper is a little bit of a reach. Yeah. I showed this to a group a couple weeks ago, and he goes, that's an Arkansas bidet. But yeah, that's probably causing more problems. I'm not sure what happened here. Besides, I mean, you can cut your cost all you want, but it looks to me, I don't know, I would not drink out of that fountain. I wouldn't stand next to the fountain when somebody else is drinking out of it. Here's a guy that made his little man cave for the weekend, but he didn't have a ladder tall enough to get into it. But don't worry, he called the cavalry, and they all got together, and now they can party on the weekend. Now, I got to be honest, I would love to hang out there and see what goes on the weekend. There's some stuff going down, isn't it? There's probably some activity going down there. If you've ever bought somebody a Snuggie or received a Snuggie, there was no planning involved in that. They just stopped at the gas station on the 24th of December, picked it up, right? And as bad as the Snuggie is, I got these version of this from my uncle last Christmas. Microwavable slippers. Have y'all heard of these things? How did this get past R&D? They're slippers you heat up in the microwave for about 30 seconds, then you pop them on your feet, and your feet are toasty for a whole hour, which is great for you and your feet, and too bad for the next guy to use that microwave oven right there. Like what'd you put on these nachos? They got a kick. Yes, they do. I mean, how gross is that? Like, I don't know. I don't know. Let's move on. But we know we need to focus. What do we need to focus on? You know, the Pareto principle really is a guiding thing in my life. I learned it way back in school, and if you keep your eyes open for it, it's everywhere. And if you don't remember it or it sounds vaguely familiar, it also goes by the 80-20 rule. So this comes across almost everywhere you look if you know when to look for it. 20% of your focused efforts will generate 80% of your results. When you are really focused, you can get a lot of your day done. Conversely, if you're just not focused all day, it can take you 80% of your time just to get 20% of your results done. So in that time when you've got your cup of coffee, or if you're an afternoon person, whatever it may be, and you know you can get your work done, that's really why it's important to set those boundaries and not let people interrupt you. You know, focus on what you can do, again, not the stuff you can't do. If you're in a fundraising group, anybody part of a nonprofit board or anything like that, and you do some fundraising events, so typically, and if you're not, you see these signs, like the March of Dimes is a good example. Every time you drive down, they've got their fundraising goal. It's at 80% almost every time. And then they've got 20% to close out. It takes so much more effort to finish what they started because they have repeat donors every year. Some people signed up automatically, and they've got that 80% almost in the bank when they start. But then it takes so much effort to finish it out. That last 20% can be tricky. In the United States, again, just in this country, 80% of crimes are committed by 20% of the criminals who get out and repeat them again. 20% of people earn 80% of the money in the country, and 20% of patients utilize 80% of the healthcare resources. So when you start looking, you'll see it. You'll even see it in your own life. If you're married, that 20% of the decisions might be made by the husband. And probably 80% of the important decisions are made by the wife at least. And 100% of the time your wife is correct if you want to live a long life and not have your food poisoned. So there you go, very important. But it does show up, and it tells us important things. What is the most important thing you can do at work each day? Make sure you focus on that and let the other things come alongside of it. You know, the biggest obstacle to getting the plan going in the first place is waiting till it's perfect. And I guarantee you, you'll never have a perfect plan. I don't care how long you try to figure it out, because by the time you figure out a perfect plan, things have changed and you got to change that plan again. So good is a good start and good enough a lot of times. You can't have perfect. You got to resist that and set realistic goals. A lot of times we think we can get things done because they have to be done in 2 months, but the reality is it's a 2-year project. And if we're trying to set a realistic goal, we can't try to squeeze 2 years into 2 months. The stress is too high, mistakes happen, safety is a concern. It really has to be realistic, and the only way you can really figure that out is to talk to people who've been there and done that to see what obstacles they had and plan for those in advance, you know. One of my favorite quotes came from General Patton a long time ago. A good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan executed next week. And why is that? Because it started. The plan's already in motion. Next week, something's going to get in the way, and the plan won't get started. So it's important to get things. I don't know if you need to be violent with everything you do, but it'll get people's attention at least. And what happens a lot of times is this Parkinson's law comes into effect. Now, this is a law that, again, you'll see it in your life now that you know about it, or it's refreshed in your memory, but it says work will expand to fill the time allotted for completion. So if you don't have a deadline, it never gets done. So you at least need to have a deadline to shoot for to complete something. If you think back to your school days, if you were like me, when the homework was due on Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was doing it about 1:50 on Tuesday, right? Because that was the end of the timeline, but I finished it up right at the end. Very few people finish it all the first day and then have 2 weeks to coast. Just human nature, as it gets closer, it becomes more important. And we don't always function the best if we put it off to the end. Sometimes the pressure is good for some of us to motivate us, but again, it'll expand if you don't have a deadline for sure. If it doesn't work out, of course, a perfect plan is going to have mistakes. You just got to own it. You got to tell people what you learned from that mistake and just move ahead. You don't ignore it, because that'll just linger around and follow you forever, but just take ownership and share what you learned from it. If you got blame floating around where you're at in your office, it's only because of the absence of accountability. So somebody, even if it's not your own fault, sometimes you just got to step forward, absorb that hit, and move on. Because if not, it's always floating around. And it's just kind of that thing between you and everybody else that makes you not want to show up for work or not walk by that person in the office. You really got to accept responsibility and just move ahead. My wife, I don't pick on my wife, but I'll explain her to you a little bit. And see if I can translate this. She doesn't like to take responsibility sometimes for just little things. If it's big things, she has no problem. But little things, she pretends they never happen. Like the other day, I made a cup of coffee. I liked my coffee, but it was a little bit hot, so I set it down. Went and got the mail, got the newspaper, came back in. And when I got back in, she had finishing off the last drop of my coffee and putting that mug in the dishwasher. And I saw her, and it's no big deal. I said, honey, did you just drink my cup of coffee? She's like, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. And she runs out of the room. Like, it's just you and me here right now. Pretty sure you did. And it was no big deal, but she says that all the time. And I was trying to figure out a way to explain it to her or show her without, getting on her about it. So later on that afternoon, I saw an opportunity. She had done the laundry. She did all the towels and washcloths and all those things. And she gets them out of the dryer and she folds them up and stacks them up color coordinated. And my job is to take them and put them in the right bathrooms later on when I get a chance. So she put them in the basket, left it in the laundry room. When she wasn't looking, I took all those towels and threw them back in the dryer. I know, I'm lucky to be standing upright and talking out of my mouth. Yeah, I did. I put them in there and cranked that sucker back up on high and just waited and waited. And about a half hour later, she walks by the laundry room and says, what? I thought I folded all them towels. I'm like, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. I ran upstairs to take a shower and I locked the door and she's flushing the toilet trying to scald me. She's like, I'm like, are you flushing the toilet? Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Then I get down with my shower and I reach out for my towel and it's not there because I threw them all back in the dryer when I was downstairs. But she does that all the time. So that's one just little example, but it's not a big deal. I'll make another cup of coffee. It's 50 cents. Move on with life. Keys to planning, a couple of quick ones. You have to have a deadline, a realistic deadline, a target. Even if in the back of your head you're like, it's probably going to be 2 more weeks and that's my real target. You need to have that first one to get it finished up. You got to take ownership of all your mistakes. And if somebody makes a mistake that works with you, you don't have to punish them for making a mistake. That's another thing I want to say is you only learn from mistakes. So if you punish somebody for making mistakes, then they never learn again because they don't want to take any chances to learn. So it's important to not celebrate it, but to investigate it and learn from it. All right, another question for the trivia. Let's see if we can get this one. Oh, this is going to be hard, but I'm going to give you some clues. Does anybody know Barney Fife? What did he get his parents for an anniversary gift? If anybody gets this one, I'll be surprised. I'll give you a clue. It was something for their house. Give me something to start with and I'll help you.
A clock.
Bigger than a clock. Bigger than a TV. Bigger than a fridge.
An elephant.
Not an elephant. Probably smaller than a car. It would be outside though. It wouldn't be inside the house. Not a cow. What was that? Not a tractor. In fact, it's one of those things that if it's working right, you don't even think about it for years at a time. Not a dishwasher or air conditioner. No moving parts, really. It includes water, but it doesn't heat it up. Not a pool, but it is in the ground. Septic tank. There you go. We figured it out. Yeah. That's a pretty tough one if you don't remember watching the show that closely. But yeah, it was a septic tank. At the end of one of the episodes, Barney and Andy are sitting on his front porch, and Andy says, "What'd you get your parents for their anniversary gift?" And Barney's like, "Well, I went across the street and got them a septic tank." They're like, "A septic tank?" He's like, "Yeah, it's something they'll need and they won't take back to the store." So there you go. So, practicality. All right, the best part about things, if we get the distractions under control, get back on track with our plan, we actually have time to enjoy our job and to serve people the way we want to serve them in the first place. We get so distracted that we can't really do the job to our fullest potential. And it's not necessarily our fault, but it's our fault if we don't acknowledge the problems and the distractions we have. One of my favorite examples of serving somebody beyond their expectations was when Aunt B, who was the housekeeper for Andy and Opie on the show, she was also the cook, cleaner, everything. She found out there was a new deal at the new butcher shop going on downtown. He was going to give you 50% off a whole side of beef. And as somebody who tried to work with the budget and stretch the dollar, she couldn't pass it up. She went to the new butcher shop. She didn't go to the guy on the right there, or yeah, I guess your left, who was a previous butcher. She went to the new guy because he had a good deal. Now think about that. It happens in business a lot, right? Somebody offers a better price to lock it in for a couple of years, and you go that way. You don't even know how they're going to serve you yet. So she gets the side of beef, brings it home, plugs in the freezer that she got at an auction months ago, had never even plugged it in. Freezer doesn't freeze, doesn't get cold. She has a side of beef and it's starting to warm up. So she doesn't know what to do. Andy comes home for lunch. He sees the whole side of beef, sees the freezer. So what's going on? She's like, "Well, the freezer won't work." He's like, "Just call the man that fixes the freezer and get it working so you can put the side of beef in there." Again, she doesn't want to spend any extra money, so she thinks maybe it needs to warm up before it cools down, so she just keeps trying. 4 o'clock rolls around and the whole side of beef is starting to thaw out and the freezer isn't changing at all. So she puts it all back in the wagon, takes it downtown to the butcher shop she bought it from, but the new guy closed at 4 and it's 4:15. The only guy in town that has a freezer big enough for a side of beef is the butcher she didn't buy it from, and he's open till 5. So there's a few different things you can think about as you listen to this story. She didn't do anything wrong, right? There's no crime committed, but she's going to have to humble herself and go talk to this other guy who she didn't buy the meat from, who she'd been going to and had no problem with his service in the past, to ask him if he could store the meat for her. So that's what she does. She goes in there, and without blinking, the butcher says, "You know what, Aunt B, I'll store that for you, and when you get your freezer running, let me know, and I'll drop it off. And maybe one day I'll win your business back." Well, when do you think you won her business back? Just then, right? Did it cost him any money to win her business back? Did he have to train anybody? Did he have to get a new system in place? Did he have to advertise? No. He just had to put himself in her position and think, how would I want to be treated right now in a tough spot? And when you serve people above and beyond their expectations, when they need it the most and expect it the least, that's a powerful bond. That's the customer for life. And that's when people start telling other people about what you did for them, and it increases your numbers just by doing the right thing. But it's hard to do the right thing if you're always busy and too busy to think about the other person. But it's super important and a good example. You know, Henry Ford is attributed to a lot of great quotes and a lot of great business moves, but he basically summed this up many years ago and says if there's any one secret of success, it lies in the ability to get to the other person's point of view and see things from their angle as well as from your own. And if you can do that, you can see how to have the problem solved pretty much. I've got to brag on Chick-fil-A here for a minute. I like all the chicken places. I'll eat chicken all day long. But this story came up a while back, and I just thought this is an example of just what I'm talking about right now. A lady was on the way to the hospital to give birth to her first baby. She's 30 miles away. Her water breaks or whatever, and she tells her husband, "We can't make it to the delivery room. We're going to have to pull over and have the baby." And then she goes, "Oh, there's a Chick-fil-A on this exit. We'll have the baby in there. It'll be clean, they'll be nice, and they're going to help us out." Well, first off, if people are having babies at your fast food place because it's clean, congratulations. Right? Ain't no babies down at Arby's right now, I'll tell you that much. Right? So the husband pulls in the Chick-fil-A, talks to the manager, he goes, I guess so, and they have the baby right there. And they were nice, they were helpful, it was clean, and the baby was born healthy, no problems whatsoever. And to me, that would have been enough. With liability issues and insurance, just opening your door, allowing that to happen on your premises, way beyond what I would expect from anybody. But the guy that ran that particular Chick-fil-A said, you know what? This was incredible. I want you guys to know y'all can eat here for free until your child turns 14, and I'll be more than happy to give them a job if they want it. How about that? Isn't that amazing? I told my wife, did we ever miss out on that deal? I had no idea. Did y'all know those were the rules? If I had known those were the rules, we'd had our baby at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. We would have done it. Keep bringing me those $18 mashed potatoes, buddy. They must be miraculous. But all it did was think about the other person. And think about, I'm telling you that story. It's been multiplied thousands of times over the past couple of years that I've heard this story, but other people are probably sharing that same story too. And again, they weren't doing it for any other reason than to do the right thing, and it just became something bigger than themselves. The same thing happens when you do the wrong thing, by the way. It can go out pretty much 10 times faster, so at least thinking it through is going to be to your benefit. In fact, babies will be born anywhere. Just saw this happen last week. A baby was born at a Walmart in Joplin, Missouri, and according to the manager there, it was the first thing made in the USA they've had in that store ever. So they didn't have to import the baby. It was right there all of a sudden. Now, how do we know if we're doing a good job? Well, we got our internal system that tells us, hey, that feels good, we did something right, but we really don't know unless we follow up and find out from the person that we served. I do not like going to the dentist any more than the next person, but my dentist is incredible. When I first moved to Nashville and got a place there, my wife picked up a job and she had insurance, so she started asking her people at her work, where do you guys go for your dentist? And they all of them said this one guy. So I said, all right, let's try him out. We go in, get our checkup done. Everything seemed nice and smooth. Everything was on time, which is a big thing for me. And then before you know it, next morning happens, and I get a phone call from the dentist the next day. Not the secretary or the front desk person or anybody else, but the dentist calls me up and says, how are you feeling this morning? I said, pretty good. Should I feel different? He goes, no, I'm just checking on you, because sometimes I get in there and I poke around and jab a little bit, and something will flare up, and people won't call and tell me, and then it turns into a bigger problem, and I didn't want you to have any problems, so just following up with you. I said, man, I appreciate the call. Doing great. I'll see you in 6 months. About 5 minutes later, my wife's cell phone rings. It's the dentist calling him. We had gone in on the same day. He's calling her to check on her to make sure she was all right. Same conversation. Then she hung up and she looked at me. He's like, did the dentist just call you? I'm like, yeah. I said, isn't that great? First time people through his office, he gives them a personal phone call the next day to make that connection. He didn't have to do it, but it was nice. I said, I feel good about this guy. So we set up our next appointments. We go in 6 months later, get our cleaning done. The next morning, he calls again. It wasn't a first-time thing. It was an every-time thing. Whether we got a cleaning or a filling, whatever it was, he always called the next day. And when I started putting this part of the presentation together, I thought of him immediately, like, this guy follows up. So I asked him, how do you have the time to do that? And he just looked at me and goes, man, I tell you what, how do I not have the time to do that? I'm like, ooh, that's good stuff right there. I said, well, how did it start? He goes, when I first got into dentistry, I just got out of UT Knoxville Dental School, moved back to Nashville. Me and 3 other college friends of mine, we opened up this office. We were in one room, one cubicle in the basement of this building, and we might have 1 patient a day when we first started. And he said we would call them up the next day just to make sure they were all right. And before he knew it, we had more people the next day, then 5 people, then 10. And before, he said 2 or 3 months went by, and we had to take over the whole first floor. And he said it didn't dawn on me then how it happened, but I realize now it's just making sure people are taken care of. He goes, I've never put up a billboard or yellow pages or any of that kind of stuff. I just let word of mouth do it, and if it starts tapering off, then I know I'm not doing something right. But now, he went from 1 cubicle, then the basement. He owns the entire building and bought the building next door so he could put a lab in there to get his dental work back, so sometimes the patients can get it done all in the same day instead of waiting for something to ship out and come back. So not only did he take care of them initially, he's done it his entire career, and he's retired, but he's still in there 3 days a week to take care of the people that he saw when he first got there. He doesn't want to leave them until they leave him. So incredible example of following up. But again, I'd have been happy or surprised if the front desk would have called and checked on me. But the fact he did it made me pretty loyal to this guy. And I've paid for his son's college with my dental work, I'm pretty sure, over the years. And he's the guy that checks me out now. But you do got to check up, not just in business, but around the house. You got to check up too. My wife said this to me back in February, and I think it might be beneficial for y'all to think this way a little bit. We're sitting on the couch. She had talked me into watching one of those Hallmark movies. You ever have to watch a Hallmark movie? Oh my goodness. If you've never seen one, I'll just sum it up. There's a guy, he's got a beard, he wears a sweater, they get married. That's the whole thing right there. Might be a snowstorm at some point that kind of throws a wrench in the thing. But we're sitting on the couch, we're watching this movie, and she's like, "What are you thinking right now?" I'm like, "Oh, not now. I'm thinking, how long is this movie going to be?" I said, "I'm not thinking anything. I'm hollow up here most of the time, honey." She goes, "No, I can tell you're thinking about saying something, but you don't know whether you should or not." I'm like, "That's been the last 23 years, every single moment of every single day." Then she says this, she goes, "I think sometimes you would like me to read your mind." I'm like, "Oh no, I don't want you to read my-" You'd have punched me in the face yesterday after that laundry incident. I said, I don't know what you're getting at here. She goes, "I can really tell you're thinking about," I said, "Well, if you got to know, we're watching this Hallmark movie. It's a Valentine's Day special, and every commercial is telling me what I should spend my money on to get you a gift for this year. And they're getting kind of pushy, aren't they, fellas? Like, it used to be chocolates or a movie or a dinner was plenty. One commercial came on and said, "Get her a car. She won't expect that." I'm like, "Well, no, she won't." She'd be surprised if I filled up the gas tank. So I said, I'm looking at these commercials thinking, what am I going to get you? After all these years of being married, I'm kind of out of ideas. In fact, I'm down to getting you gift cards to places that I want to go out to eat. You know, have y'all done that game yet? Yeah, they don't understand. So I said, I don't know what to tell you. I said, just let me know what you want, and I'll get it. It might not be a surprise. Give me 2 or 3 things, so maybe it'll be a surprise which one. She goes, "Well, listen, this is too much stress for you, I can tell right now. So for Valentine's Day this year, we're not going to exchange gifts. Just forget all about it. I swear I won't buy you nothing. You don't buy me nothing either. But here's what we're going to do. Instead of exchanging gifts, we're going to exchange ideas to each other on a piece of paper instead." I said, "What kind of ideas?" She said, "I'm going to write down a couple of things you're not doing right around the house you could do better, and you write down a couple of things about me." I'm like, stop right there. Right? That's like a trap door on an escalator. I'm like, let me get this straight. We're going to tell each other stuff we're not doing right around the house, and that's a nice Valentine's Day? She goes, "Well, if we fix those 6 or 7 things." I'm like, she's got a list started already. I was down 6-0, didn't even play in the game. But in my guy head, I was thinking, I don't have to go spend any money or go shopping. This won't cost me nothing. Yeah. Then I realized if I say the wrong thing, it could cost me the house. So I had about a week or so to figure out what I could tell her she was doing wrong. I knew I was down 6-0, so I was writing down everything I could think of. We go out to Valentine's Day dinner, which is the worst night of the year to go to a restaurant. You ever been in that mess? I mean, we're sitting there 45 minutes, hadn't seen our food yet. I said, while we're waiting, what am I not doing right? She goes, "Well, here's the big thing. If I ask you to fix something in the house, can you do it the same year I ask you to do it?" I'm like, "I'm good at that." She goes, "No, you're not." She said, "I'll ask you to change a light bulb in the light fixture. You wait till every light bulb around it burns out. Then you get a ladder and change them all at once." I'm like, "That's why they put the extra ones up there." Yeah, that's right. I did not say that. I said, "Honey, I will try harder." She goes, "Okay, what about me?" I said, "I want to be real clear here. I don't think you're doing nothing wrong at all. One thing I kind of miss, you don't have to do it, but before we had our kids 19 years ago, sometimes on the weekend you make me this big old breakfast like I had growing up on the farm. Grits, ham, eggs, gravy, everything, biscuits." I said, "I don't expect it, but man, that was great." And I looked back across the table and she had started tearing up and crying right there at the Wendy's. I mean, right in the Baconator, you know. I said, "I didn't mean to make you cry. That's a compliment. I missed that cooking." She goes, "Well, I didn't know. I'm glad you told me. Maybe I'll make you breakfast again one day." I'm like, "All right, then. Maybe I'll change a light bulb." You know. Well, fellas, here's why you communicate and you talk things out like this. The next morning, guess what? I wake up at 6 a.m. I smell maple syrup and pancakes. I have no idea what else. And I run downstairs, and my sweet wife had bought a candle somewhere that smells exactly... Oh, yeah. It's funny now, ain't it? You ever been hungry and mad at 6 a.m.? I hit the bottom step. I see this candle flickering in the darkness. I'm like, "What is going on down here?" She's like, "Oh, I had to use that. The last light bulb just burned out." Got me twice. But I share that because I'm kind of curious. She had never asked me, what are you thinking? And I didn't ask, what are you getting at? And she didn't tell me she had 6 things she thought I was doing wrong around the house. By the way, I found out what those 6 things were and tried to shore the ship up a little bit. That list may have been 20 things at some point, and then 50 things, and then maybe she just walked around me in the house and resented me being there because I wasn't doing things I didn't know I should be doing. So about once a month we get together at the end of the month to plan for the next month, and I always say, anything on that list? Anything going on that list? And we've kind of worked it out. But it's important to know what they're thinking and not assume that you know what everybody's thinking. And if it's a complaint, that's all it is. A complaint is not a personal attack, but we take it that way a lot because it's coming to us. It's really just an invitation to innovate and solve a problem in a different way. Somebody only comes to you with a complaint because they couldn't figure it out themselves. They're in a humble mode. They're asking you to solve the problem. Now, a lot of times we're busy too, and we got other things going on. But if we can get our distractions eliminated and focus on our job, we can serve people ahead and above and beyond. And if we don't, somebody else will, you know. Uber. Now, Uber, 10 years ago wasn't even a thing. And then as technology came around, 5G and all this stuff, and you can pinpoint locations, they solved one of the biggest problems I used to have traveling was getting in a taxi and having no idea exactly where you were going, right? Y'all remember those days? Anybody remember? Remember the first time I flew into Las Vegas? You could see everything. It looked like a Monopoly board. Everything's a city block. You knew exactly where your hotel was. He goes, where are you staying at? I said, the Luxor. He takes me the other way out into the desert. And I'm like, buddy, I can see it out the back window. He goes, oh, you don't know all the construction we're having around here. I'm like, you're constructing a pool out of all the extra money you're making off of these tourists. That's all you're doing. I said, you got to turn it around or I'm getting out. And he reluctantly turned it around. But he was just trying to add the fare up. You know, it used to just chip over. And you set it. You at least know with Uber how much it's going to cost and who your driver's going to be and their license plate number. So when I travel, I screenshot that and text it to my wife. I said, listen, if I go missing, this is the guy right here. I'm in the Chevy Malibu with 2 stars. But we don't have Uber where I live. We got Goober, and that's good enough. Now, Cracker Barrel, another company that I enjoy their products. I love going to Cracker Barrel. Anybody else enjoy the Cracker Barrel a little bit? They're huge, but they still take the time to find out what their customers' needs are and take care of them. You know, they have a lot of locations, 641 here in the U.S. Annual revenue is over $3 billion every single year. But they listen and they test things and they learn and refine. And what happened to me at the Cracker Barrel a few years ago, I'm sitting there. Me and my wife usually go on Thursday night before I go out of town. We'll have a little meal. Get the same waitress almost every time. She's probably 130, 140, somewhere in there. But she's just a spark of energy at her age. She came down this night. She goes, you mind if I sit with y'all for about 5 minutes and ask y'all some questions? I said, well, have a seat. She sat there with the clipboard. She goes, we're just doing this survey, and we're supposed to ask our most frequent customers these questions, and y'all aren't here a lot, so just bear with me. She goes, what do you like about Cracker Barrel? So I told her Uncle Herschel's favorite. They took it off the menu, so now I'm kind of mad, but that was my favorite. She goes, what do you not like about the Cracker Barrel? I said, man, y'all are so good. Sometimes I drive up, and it's so busy, and I see people out in front playing checkers. I know it's going to be 30 minutes, and I don't have it, so sometimes because you're so busy, I go somewhere else. But that's really the only reason I go somewhere else. She goes, all right, you can go other. She goes through this whole list, and then she gives us like a $20 gift card so we can come back and have a meal just for answering those questions. So that happened. About 2 years passed. I hadn't even thought about it. And then we're sitting there one day, and me and my wife are talking. I'm like, remember that time we took that survey? She's like, yeah, what was that about? So we had the same waitress. She came over, and I said, hey, that survey 2 years ago, we answered some questions. What was that all about? She goes, oh, yeah. She goes, well, that helped us out a lot. Thank you. I said, well, what was the results? She goes, we got back so much information. She goes, our number one problem at Cracker Barrel, we know that the millennials and the younger people love our food because they finish the plate and they get to-go boxes. But we never see them come in here as a group on their own. They're always with their parents or their grandparents. We could not figure out how to serve those people because in 15, 20 years, those are going to be the parents and grandparents. And if we don't find out how to get to them now and take care of them, they're probably not going to think about us. I said, well, what else did you learn? She goes, well, we learned that in that age group, it's important to them to have lots of menu options, gluten-free, all these different allergy type resistant foods or what have you. They also want to have locally sourced food whenever they can, something that farm to table as close as we can get it. Not always possible in a big company like that, but we're trying. And I said, well, did you change anything? She goes, yeah, we changed the menu options really quickly, but also they rolled out a test kitchen, and it was called Holler and Dash. And it was in Nashville, Tennessee. Holler and dash, I guess squat and gobble was already taken. But holler like down in the holler, and holler like I need some biscuits, and dash like a dash of salt, and dash like I got to get it to go. So they had thought it through, even though it sounds kind of weird. And so they opened up one of these stores. And they made it everything that the age group, the millennials especially, gave them feedback on that they wanted. They wanted a fast, casual dining experience, kind of like a Panera, where you're not, sitting there waiting for a waitress. They didn't want a waitress. They wanted to come in, order their food. They wanted to get it in about 8 minutes or less, and so they get their food in 8 minutes or less. The menu is much smaller. Almost everything's on a biscuit, but it's locally sourced as best they can. In fact, in Nashville, everything was farm to table there. And then if you want to get it to go, you can get it to go, but you're welcome to sit around and hang out. But it's not going to be a place that makes you feel like you walked into an antique store. And that's what some of the feedback they got. And so if you go to Cracker Barrel now, I don't know how many stores have done it in out of the 641, but I think at least 30, they're changing their whole decor. How many people have been to a First Watch? It's like a breakfast place. So it's a lot more like that. Just kind of clean, still feels a little farmy, but you don't have stuff hanging on the walls that looks like it's been there for 80 years or more. So they listened, they took care of their customers, and they served them beyond their expectations or exactly as they expected. Girl Scout cookies, if you have a daughter that sells those, my goodness, the cookies are smaller and they're more expensive, but I heard this story I'll wrap up with here real quick about a Girl Scout who found her target demo and served them so good she sold a ton of boxes, 300 boxes in 6 hours outside of a CBD dispensary in Denver, Colorado. So she went where the need was and took care of the people as they needed to be taken care of. So, salesperson of the year. Location, location, location. So just to kind of recap this last little section, it is important to eliminate distractions so we can focus on our plan and do the work that we're hired to do and that we get fired up to do. But if we can get all that moving in the right direction, you actually have time to think about the people you're having an impact on a little deeper and serve them in a way that they didn't even expect or beyond what they expected. And that's when you get the customers for life and the people that keep coming back, and it starts spreading the word about all the great work you're doing. So hope you picked up 1 or 2 tips at least that you can apply in the next few days when you go back and get them going. Especially the social media tips, if you can push that off to late in the day, just try that. Try it for a week, and I think you'll see you'll get some time back that way. And obviously avoid those multitasking distractions that we all have. I'll see you guys later on today, I think, but I'm going to turn things back over and let you guys get dismissed here to lunch in just a second. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. You want to use that guy?